The sound of small running feet echoed through the marble foyer. Dominic Thorne froze, briefcase still in hand, as 3 identical children burst into view. Time seemed to stop as 3 pairs of hazel eyes, his eyes, stared up at him with wonder and excitement. "Daddy!" cried the little girl in front, copper curls bouncing as she ran toward him. "You're home." For a moment, Dominic couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process the impossible scene before him. These weren't just any children. These were his children. Children he never knew existed until this very moment. Have you ever had your entire life change in a single heartbeat? When the words, "I'm your daddy," suddenly take on new meaning that shakes the very foundation of everything you thought you knew. What would you do if you discovered the person who broke your heart had kept the greatest gift in the world from you for 3 years? 3 years of first steps, first words, first everything, gone forever. Stay with me to discover how one billionaire's cold goodbye led to an unexpected second chance at the family he never knew he wanted, and the love he thought he'd lost forever. "I'm Eliza," announced the little girl, stopping just short of touching him. "That's Theo with the elephant, and that's Madeline. We're triplets. We're 3. Mama said you're our daddy, and we're staying with you while she fixes the broken building." Eleanor appeared in the doorway behind the children, her expression a mixture of apology and hope. "I see you've met your children, Dominic." "My children," he repeated softly, the words not a question but a revelation. He knelt down slowly, bringing himself to their level, his eyes drinking in every detail of their perfect faces. "Hello, Eliza, Theo, and Madeline. I'm very happy to meet you." Eliza, bold and fearless, stepped forward and placed a small hand on his cheek. "You look like the pictures Mama has, but bigger." A lump formed in Dominic's throat. "Vivian has pictures of me?" "In her special box," Madeline confirmed, moving closer now. "She looks at them sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping." The knowledge that Vivian had kept reminders of him, that she might have her own regrets, sent a wave of emotion through Dominic that he struggled to contain. Theo, still clutching his stuffed elephant, took a tentative step forward. "This is Archie," he said quietly, holding up the stuffed animal. "He keeps me safe at night." Without hesitation, Dominic reached out and gently touched the elephant's worn ear. "Hello, Archie. Thank you for taking such good care of Theo." The simple acknowledgement seemed to break through the boy's shyness. His face lit up with a smile so like Vivian's that Dominic felt his chest constrict. "Would you like to see our room?" Eliza asked, already tugging at his hand. "Miss Eleanor made it pretty for us." Dominic looked up at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. "They've been waiting for you since they arrived this afternoon. Vivian had to leave for Chicago. There's a structural emergency with one of her projects." "Vivian's projects?" Dominic asked, allowing Eliza to pull him to his feet, while Theo slipped a small hand into his other one. "She has her own architectural firm now," Eleanor explained as they followed the children toward the stairs, specializing in sustainable urban renewal. The Lakefront Commons project in Chicago is her biggest commission to date. Pride mingled with regret in Dominic's heart. Of course Vivian had succeeded on her own. Her talent had always been exceptional, her vision unique. That she had built a career while raising 3 children, his children, spoke to a strength he had always admired but had perhaps underestimated. "She didn't tell me," he said quietly to Eleanor as the children raced ahead up the stairs. "About the pregnancy. About them." "No," Eleanor agreed, her voice gentle but firm. "She didn't, and you'll need to address that with her eventually. But right now, those 3 children need their father. A father who's happy to see them, who wants to know them." Dominic nodded, understanding the implicit message in Eleanor's words. Whatever complicated emotions he felt toward Vivian, the hurt of her secrecy, the regret of his own actions, needed to be set aside for the sake of the children. The Blue Guest Suite had been transformed into a cheerful children's room, with 3 small beds arranged in a row, each with different colored bedding. Stuffed animals and books were arranged neatly on shelves, and a nightlight cast a soft glow over the space. "This is my bed," Eliza announced, pointing to the one with purple bedding. And that's Theo's with the green, and Madeline's is the blue one. It's a wonderful room, Dominic said, genuinely impressed by how quickly Eleanor had adapted his austere home for children. Do you like it? It's bigger than our room at home, Madeline observed. But we miss Mama. I understand, Dominic said, sitting down on the edge of Eliza's bed as the children gathered around him. I'm sure you do miss her, but she'll be back soon, and until then, I'll take very good care of you. Do you know how to make pancakes? Theo asked seriously. Mama makes pancakes shaped like animals on Saturdays. Dominic, who had never cooked a meal in his life, found himself smiling. I don't know how to make pancakes yet, but I'm very good at learning new things. Perhaps you can teach me on Saturday. It's almost bedtime, Eleanor interjected gently. Why don't you get ready for bed? And your father can read you a story? Yes, Eliza clapped her hands. Mama always reads us a story before bed. As Eleanor helped the children change into pajamas and brush their teeth, Dominic stood by the window, watching the rain and trying to process the seismic shift in his world. He had children. 3 beautiful, perfect children who carried his blood and Vivian's spirit. And Vivian, what must she have gone through? Pregnant with triplets, building a new career, raising 3 children alone. All because he had pushed her away, convinced that his own emotional damage made him unworthy of the future they might have had together. When the children were tucked into their beds, Eleanor handed him a well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon with an encouraging smile. They said this is their favorite. Dominic sat in the chair between the beds and opened the book, his deep voice filling the room as he read the simple, soothing words. 3 pairs of eyes, his eyes, watched him with wonder and growing drowsiness. By the time he finished, Theo was already asleep, clutching Archie tightly. Madeline's eyes were heavy, though she fought to keep them open. Will you be here when we wake up? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. Yes, Dominic promised, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. I'll be here. Good, she murmured, finally allowing her eyes to close. Mama says promises are important. Eliza, still wide awake, studied him with curious intensity. Do you have a mommy and daddy? The question caught him off guard. I have a mother, he said carefully. She lives in Boston. My father died when I was young. Were you sad? Yes, Dominic admitted, surprised by his own honesty with this child he'd just met. I was very sad for a long time. Eliza nodded, as if this confirmed something important. Sometimes Mama is sad too, but she says we're her sunshine that makes the sad go away. Something twisted in Dominic's chest, regret, longing, a glimpse of what might have been if he hadn't been so afraid. You should sleep now, he said softly. Tomorrow is a new day. Okay, good night, Daddy. The word, so casually spoken, hit him with unexpected force. Good night, Eliza, he whispered, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. When all 3 children were finally asleep, Dominic made his way downstairs to find Eleanor waiting in his study with a glass of scotch and an envelope. You look like you need this, she said, handing him the drink. And this is from Vivian. She asked me to give it to you after you'd met the children. Dominic took both, sinking into his leather chair. Why didn't she tell me, Eleanor? The question that had been burning inside him since the moment he saw those 3 small faces looking up at him with his own eyes. That's something you'll need to discuss with her, Eleanor replied carefully. But I think her letter might provide some insight. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after heartbreak, hit that like button right now. Dominic stared at the envelope for a long moment before finally opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Vivian's distinctive handwriting, the elegant, precise script he'd admired on countless design notes and love letters in another lifetime. Dominic, by now you've met Eliza, Theo, and Madeline. I imagine you're feeling shocked, confused, and perhaps angry that I kept them from you for 3 years. You have every right to those feelings. I found out I was pregnant the morning you ended our relationship. 3 heartbeats where there should have been 1. I was terrified and heartbroken. And yes, Too proud to tell you after you'd made it clear our relationship was over. I'm not asking for anything beyond this week of emergency childcare. The children know you're their father, but they have no expectations. They're well-adjusted, happy, and secure in their lives. When I return from Chicago, we can discuss how to move forward in whatever way you're comfortable with. The children's medical information, daily routines, and favorite foods are in the blue folder Eleanor has. Theo is allergic to strawberries. Madeline needs her special blanket to sleep. Eliza will try to negotiate a later bedtime. Don't let her persuade you. Thank you for doing this. I wouldn't have asked if I had any other option. Vivian. Dominic read the letter twice, then set it aside and took a long swallow of scotch. The words were practical, restrained, giving no hint of Vivian's emotions beyond her initial fear and heartbreak 3 years ago. She's built an entire life without me, he said finally. Raised 3 children, started her own firm, moved on completely. Eleanor gave him a measured look. Has she? The children mentioned a box of photographs she keeps. That doesn't sound like someone who's completely moved on. Maybe not, Dominic conceded. But she had no intention of ever telling me about them, did she? If not for this emergency in Chicago, I might never have known I had children. Perhaps, Eleanor agreed. Or perhaps she was waiting for the right time. For what it's worth, those children are clearly loved and well cared for. Whatever her reasons for keeping them from you, Vivian has been an excellent mother. Dominic closed his eyes, suddenly overwhelmed by memories of the last time he'd seen Vivian. The pain in her eyes when he'd told her it was over. The way she'd held herself so rigidly, refusing to cry in front of him. The soft click of the door as she left his penthouse and his life. I don't love you anymore, he'd said, the lie burning his throat even as he forced the words out. You deserve someone who can give you what you need, Vivian. That person isn't me. He'd convinced himself it was the right thing to do, that his own damaged childhood had left him incapable of the emotional openness she deserved, that he would eventually disappoint her, hurt her. Better to end things cleanly than to slowly destroy the vibrant, loving woman who had somehow broken through his carefully constructed walls. But in the 3 years since she'd walked out of his penthouse and his life, Dominic had come to recognize the magnitude of his mistake. Without Vivian's warmth, her intuitive understanding of his unspoken thoughts, her ability to soften his hard edges, his world had become a sterile monument to success without meaning. He'd thrown himself into work, expanding Thorne Architectural Group internationally, accumulating accolades and wealth that meant nothing without someone to share them with. At night, in the emptiness of his perfectly designed home, he would sometimes find himself reaching for her in his sleep, only to awaken to cold sheets and regret. And now this 3 children who carried his blood, who called him Daddy with such easy trust. 3 years of their lives he could never get back. First steps, first words, first everything. Gone forever because of his fear, his pride, his misguided attempt to protect Vivian from himself. What do I do now, Eleanor? He asked, the question more vulnerable than any he'd allowed himself in years. You be their father, she answered simply. For however long they're here, you give them what they need. And when Vivian returns, you have an honest conversation about the future. I don't know how to be a father, Dominic admitted, the scotch and the emotional exhaustion of the evening breaking down his usual reserve. My own father was hardly a model to follow. No one knows how at first, Eleanor said gently. But those children already love you simply because you're their father. That's a gift, Dominic. Don't waste it. As he made his way to his bedroom later that night, Dominic paused outside the children's room. The door was ajar, and he could hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of 3 small humans who had irrevocably changed his life in the span of a few hours. His children, his and Vivian's. For the first time in 3 years, the hollow ache in his chest was replaced by something else. Something warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. He had no idea what the morning would bring, how he would manage 3 toddlers, or what would happen when Vivian returned. But as he finally lay down in his own bed, one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly what he needed. The morning arrived with a cacophony of sounds Dominic's meticulously ordered home had never known. Little feet padding across hardwood floors, excited whispers, and finally, the unmistakable crash of something valuable meeting its demise. He bolted upright in bed, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous night came rushing back. The children, his children. By the time he reached the hallway, Eleanor was already there, calmly sweeping up the remains of what appeared to have been an antique vase. "I'm sorry," Theo whispered, clutching Archie to his chest, eyes wide with fear. "I didn't mean to." Dominic's first instinct was irritation. The vase had been a rare Ming Dynasty piece acquired at auction for a small fortune. But the look on his son's face, instantly dissolved any concern for the priceless artifact. "It's just a thing," Dominic said, kneeling to meet Theo's eyes. "Things can be replaced. Are you hurt?" Theo shook his head, relief washing over his features. "Good. That's all that matters." Dominic glanced at Eleanor, who was watching the exchange with barely concealed approval. "Perhaps we should child-proof a few areas today." "Already ordered, sir," Eleanor replied with the efficiency that had made her indispensable for 12 years. "The team will be here at 9. Eliza appeared in the doorway of the children's room, her copper curls a wild tangle around her face. "I'm hungry," she announced without preamble. "Can we have pancakes?" Dominic checked his watch, 6:17 a.m. His usual morning routine involved a 5-mile run, protein shake, and 90 minutes of emails before most of the world was even awake. "Pancakes," he repeated, as if considering a complex architectural problem. "I suppose we could try that." Madeline joined her siblings, already fully dressed in a neat blue jumper, her hair somehow perfectly combed. "Mama makes them in shapes," she informed him seriously. "Animals and stars and hearts." "I see." Dominic straightened, facing the first real challenge of fatherhood with the same determination he applied to billion-dollar negotiations. "Well, I can't promise animals, but I'm sure we can manage something edible." Eleanor coughed discreetly. "Perhaps I should assist with breakfast this first morning." "Nonsense," Dominic replied, surprising himself with his own response. "How difficult can pancakes be? I design buildings that defy gravity. Surely I can manage a simple breakfast." Have you ever had to swallow your pride for someone you love? Share your story in the comments below. 45 minutes later, the kitchen, a showcase of minimalist design that had been featured in Architectural Digest, looked like a war zone. Flour dusted every surface, eggshells littered the counter, and something sticky had splashed across the refrigerator door. In the center of the chaos stood Dominic Thorne, billionaire architect and design visionary, with pancake batter in his hair and a look of utter concentration as he attempted to pour the mixture into something resembling a star shape. "That looks like a blob," Eliza observed critically from her perch on a bar stool. "It's abstract," Dominic defended, flipping the pancake with more force than necessary, sending a spray of batter across his custom Italian shirt. "Art doesn't always have to be literal." Theo giggled, a sound so pure and delightful that Dominic found himself smiling despite the disaster surrounding him. "Mama says cooking is about love, not perfection," Madeline offered diplomatically, sliding off her stool to hand him a dish towel. The simple wisdom in her words stopped Dominic short. How many times had Vivian said something similar during their 2 years together? How often had she tried to show him that imperfection could be beautiful, that control wasn't the same as mastery? "Your mother is a very wise woman," he said softly, accepting the towel from Madeline's small hand. By the time they finally sat down to eat, the pancakes were oddly shaped and slightly overdone, but the children attacked them with enthusiasm, drowning them in maple syrup and giggling at the mess. Watching them, Dominic felt something shift inside him, a loosening of the rigid control he'd maintained for as long as he could remember. These children, with their innocent joy and uncomplicated acceptance, were already changing him in ways he couldn't have anticipated. As Eleanor efficiently cleaned up the kitchen disaster, Dominic faced his next challenge. What exactly did one do with 3 3-year-olds for an entire day? I have meetings, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Conference calls. The Tokyo project needs. Daddy, can we see where you work? Eliza interrupted, syrup dripping from her chin. Mama takes us to her office sometimes. She lets us draw on the big tables. Dominic tried to imagine these three small hurricanes in his pristine office, with its priceless architectural models and meticulously organized design plans. The thought should have horrified him. Instead, he found himself nodding. Yes, I suppose you should see where I work. We'll need to establish some ground rules, though. What are ground rules? Theo asked, carefully wiping his hands on a napkin. They're like promises about how to behave, Dominic explained. For example, no touching the models on the tables. We know, Madeline said with the slightly superior air of an eldest child, despite being a triplet. Mama has the same rule. Models are for looking, not touching. Of course Vivian would have taught them to respect the work. She had always understood the delicate balance between creativity and discipline that architecture required. 3 years ago, in the weeks after their breakup, Dominic had purged his home and office of every reminder of Vivian. Her books, her sketches, the colorful throws she'd added to his monochromatic furniture. All boxed up and removed. He'd told himself it was cleaner that way, a complete break rather than a lingering separation. But now, looking at these three children who were so clearly part of them both, he realized how futile that attempt had been. Vivian had remained with him all along, in the empty spaces he couldn't seem to fill, in the designs that never quite captured the organic warmth she'd always brought to his more austere visions. Daddy! Theo's small voice pulled him from his thoughts. Are you sad? Dominic realized he'd been staring silently at the children for several moments. No, not sad. Just thinking. About what? Eliza pressed, never one to let a question go unanswered. Apparently. About your mother, Dominic admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. About how much you remind me of her. Mama says I have your eyes but her spirit, Madeline informed him. She says Eliza has your determination, and Theo has your quiet, thinking face. The knowledge that Vivian had seen him in their children, had spoken of him to them with such insight and apparent affection, created a complicated ache in Dominic's chest. We should get ready to go, he said, standing abruptly. Eleanor will help you clean up and change clothes. I need to make a few calls before we leave. In his study, door firmly closed, Dominic allowed himself a moment of pure, unfiltered emotion. Anger, regret, wonder, joy. All of it washing through him in waves that threatened to overwhelm his carefully maintained control. 3 years. He had missed 3 years of their lives. First steps, first words, first everything. Gone forever because Vivian had chosen to keep them from him. But had she really had a choice? He had ended their relationship with a finality that left no room for discussion. Had told her he didn't love her when the truth was he'd been terrified of how much he did love her, of how vulnerable that made him. If she had told him about the pregnancy, what would he have done? Offered financial support, certainly. But would he have been ready to be a father? To open himself to the kind of love these children clearly inspired? Or would he have kept them at the same emotional distance he'd maintained with everyone else in his life? The questions had no easy answers, and there was no changing the past now. All he could do was move forward, try to be the father these children deserved for however long they were in his life. His phone buzzed with a text from his executive assistant. Board wants update on Tokyo project. Conference call in 20 minutes? Dominic typed a quick response. Bringing my children to the office today. Reschedule for tomorrow. The immediate reply, you're what? Would have been amusing if the situation weren't so surreal. My children. Triplets. 3 years old. We'll explain later. By the time they arrived at Thorne Architectural Group's headquarters in downtown Washington, Dominic had mentally prepared himself for the inevitable disruption these three small humans would cause to his meticulously ordered professional world. What he hadn't prepared for was the way his staff would react to the sight of him. Their notoriously perfectionist, emotionally reserved boss, holding hands with 2 toddlers while carrying a third who had fallen asleep in the car. Mr. Thorne, his assistant stammered. rising from her desk as they exited the elevator. I didn't. That is, we weren't expecting. Amelia, these are my children, Dominic said with a calmness he didn't entirely feel. Eliza, Madeline, and Theo. They'll be with me today. Please have the conference room stocked with appropriate snacks and activities for 3-year-olds. Of course, Amelia replied, recovering her professional demeanor despite the shock evident in her eyes. Right away, sir. As they made their way through the open concept office, Dominic was acutely aware of the stares, the whispered conversations, the sheer disbelief emanating from his employees. He had always maintained a strict separation between his personal and professional lives, to the extent that most of his staff probably assumed he didn't have a personal life at all. Now here he was, the evidence of a very personal history on display for all to see. Your building is bigger than Mama's, Eliza observed, looking around with undisguised curiosity. But not as colorful. Mama has plants everywhere, Madeline added, and big windows that open. Theo, now awake and walking beside him, simply held tighter to his hand, clearly overwhelmed by the new environment and the attention they were receiving. We design different kinds of buildings, Dominic explained, guiding them toward his private office. Your mother has always preferred organic, sustainable spaces. My work tends to be more gray, Eliza supplied helpfully. A laugh escaped him before he could stop it, drawing even more startled looks from nearby staff. Yes, I suppose it is rather gray. Inside his office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac, Dominic settled the children with paper and colored pencils at his conference table while he attempted to review the Tokyo project files. Is this Mama? Madeline asked suddenly, pointing to a framed photograph on his bookshelf. Dominic froze. The photograph shouldn't have been there. He'd removed all pictures of Vivian years ago. But when he looked where Madeline was pointing, he saw it. A group photo from the American Institute of Architects Awards ceremony 5 years earlier. Vivian stood beside him as he accepted the prestigious Pritzker Prize, her face alight with pride and love. Yes, he admitted, moving to stand beside Madeline. That was a very important night for me. Your mother was there to share it. She's pretty, Eliza declared, abandoning her drawing to examine the photograph. She's smiling really big. She was very proud that night, Dominic said softly. She had helped with many aspects of the design that won the award, though I didn't acknowledge that properly at the time. It was true. Vivian's influence on the project had been significant, her organic sensibilities softening his more rigid geometries, creating a harmony that neither of them could have achieved alone. Yet in his acceptance speech, he had barely mentioned her contribution, too focused on his own achievement to properly credit hers. Mama says we should always share the praise when we work together, Theo said quietly, looking up from his careful drawing of what appeared to be a building with an impossible number of windows. The simple statement, delivered without judgment or accusation, hit Dominic with unexpected force. How many times had he failed to acknowledge Vivian's contributions, both professionally and personally? How often had he taken without giving in return? Your mother is right, he said, kneeling to meet Theo's eyes. Sharing praise is very important. I'll remember that. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of conference calls conducted with Eliza spinning in his office chair, design reviews interrupted by Madeline's thoughtful questions about structural integrity, and a client meeting that Theo observed with such serious attention that the client jokingly offered him an internship. By lunchtime, Dominic was exhausted but strangely exhilarated. Seeing his work through the children's eyes, their questions, their observations, their unfiltered responses to the designs, had awakened something he'd almost forgotten. The pure joy of creation, of making something beautiful simply because it could be beautiful. You're different with them? Amelia observed quietly as she helped set up lunch in the conference room. I've worked for you for 7 years, and I've never seen you smile so much. Glanced at the children, now happily exploring the architectural models displayed along the windows under Eleanor's watchful eye. They make it easy, he admitted. They have no expectations, no preconceptions. They just accept. They're wonderful children, Amelia said. Their mother must be remarkable. She is, Dominic replied without hesitation. More than I gave her credit for. The afternoon brought new challenges as the children's energy began to flag. Theo grew cranky without his usual nap. Eliza became increasingly demanding of attention, and even Madeline's patience wore thin as the day progressed. By 4 o'clock, Dominic made the executive decision to abandon work entirely and take them to the nearby park, where they could burn off energy before dinner. Watching them race across the playground, their laughter carrying on the autumn breeze, Dominic felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. For 3 years, he had filled his life with work and achievement, accumulating success that felt increasingly hollow. Now, in the space of less than 24 hours, these 3 small humans had shown him how empty that existence had been. His phone rang, his mother's ringtone. For a moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail, as he often did. But something prompted him to answer. Dominic. His mother's warm voice filled the line. Eleanor called me. She said I should check in with you today. Of course, Eleanor had called her. The 2 women had maintained a friendship independent of him for years, united in their shared mission of trying to humanize the workaholic in their lives. I have children, he said without preamble. 3 of them. Triplets. They're 3 years old. A long pause. Then, Vivian's? Yes. Another pause. I'm coming down from Boston tomorrow. Don't argue. Dominic watched as Eliza fearlessly climbed to the top of the slide. Madeline cautiously followed, and Theo decided to explore the sandbox instead. I won't argue, he said quietly. I think they should meet their grandmother. Good, his mother replied, satisfaction evident in her voice. Now tell me everything. As Dominic explained the situation, Vivian's emergency trip, the children's unexpected arrival, his own shock and adjustment, he realized how much he actually wanted his mother's guidance. Margaret Thorne had raised him alone after his father's death, had sacrificed her own dreams to ensure his success, had loved him unconditionally even when he made it difficult. If anyone could help him navigate this new territory, it was she. She should have told you, his mother said when he finished. But I understand why she didn't. Do you? Dominic asked, genuinely curious. You can be intimidating, Dominic. Not just because of your success or your position, but because you hold yourself at such a distance. You always have, even as a child. After your father died, you built walls that even I couldn't always breach. Her words struck uncomfortably close to what Vivian had once told him during their final argument. You keep everyone at arm's length, she had said, tears shimmering in her eyes. Even me, especially me. I've missed so much, he said, watching as Eliza helped Theo build a sandcastle. 3 years I can never get back. Then don't waste another minute, his mother advised. Those children are giving you a gift, Dominic. The chance to be more than your work, more than your success. The chance to be truly known and truly loved, simply for who you are. As he hung up, Dominic realized that was exactly what Vivian had offered him too, the chance to be loved for himself, not his achievements or his wealth or his genius. And he had thrown it away out of fear, out of the misguided belief that he was protecting her from eventual disappointment, from the emotional limitations he'd convinced himself were permanent and unchangeable. Daddy, watch me, Eliza called from the top of the slide, her face alight with the simple joy of childhood. I'm watching, he called back, pocketing his phone and giving her his full attention. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Dominic gathered his tired children and headed home. Theo fell asleep in the car again, his head lolling against the car seat, Archie clutched tightly in one small hand. Madeline gazed out the window, humming softly to herself, while Eliza peppered Dominic with questions about everything from why the sky turns pink at sunset to whether fish sleep with their eyes open. The evening passed in a blur of dinner ordered in, after the breakfast disaster. Baths, which somehow resulted in more water on the bathroom floor than seemed physically possible. And another bedtime story, this time Where the Wild Things Are, which Eliza insisted was better because it had more roaring. When the children were finally asleep, Dominic retreated to his study with a glass of scotch and the blue folder Eleanor had mentioned, the one containing all the practical information about his children's lives. Inside, he found detailed notes in Vivian's precise handwriting. Daily schedules, favorite foods, medical information, comfort objects, sleep habits. But mixed among the practical details were personal observations that revealed the depth of her understanding of each child. Eliza needs boundaries but also freedom to explore. When she's frustrated, ask her to explain why. She has trouble identifying emotions but responds well to logical discussion. Theo appears shy but is actually deeply observant. He notices everything and processes internally before speaking. Give him time and space, and he'll share his thoughts when he's ready. Madeline is a natural mediator. She'll try to smooth over conflicts and make everyone happy, sometimes at her own expense. Encourage her to express her own needs and wants. Reading these insights, Dominic felt a renewed admiration for Vivian. She hadn't just kept their children alive for 3 years. She had studied them, understood them, nurtured their unique personalities with thoughtful intention. The last page of the folder contained something unexpected, a collection of photographs. Vivian holding 3 newborns in a hospital bed, her face exhausted but radiant. The triplets at what appeared to be their first birthday, cake smeared across 3 identical grins. A more recent image of all 4 of them at a beach, waves lapping at their feet as they laughed into the camera. A life he should have been part of, moments he could never reclaim. But there were other photographs too, ones that surprised him. The children in front of his buildings. Vivian pointing out the distinctive Thorn architectural style to toddlers who couldn't possibly understand but were looking up with rapt attention nonetheless. Theo sleeping beneath a framed blueprint of the Singapore Tower that had won Dominic his 2nd international award. She had made him part of their lives, even in his absence. Had ensured the children knew who he was, what he created, the legacy he had built. Not as a distant celebrity or a cautionary tale, but as their father, a real person with talents and accomplishments worth knowing. The realization humbled him in a way few things ever had. When Eleanor checked on him an hour later, she found him still at his desk, the photographs spread before him, his expression thoughtful. "They're remarkable children," she said softly. "They are," Dominic agreed. "She's done an extraordinary job with them." "So have you today," Eleanor observed. "For someone who claimed to know nothing about children, you've adapted remarkably well." Dominic gave a short laugh. "I've made every mistake possible. And yet they adore you already," Eleanor countered. "Children are perceptive, Dominic. They sense when someone cares, even if that someone is still learning how to show it." The next morning brought a new routine, slightly less chaotic than the first, though still far removed from Dominic's usual regimented schedule. After a breakfast of cereal, wisely avoiding another pancake disaster, he found himself facing a practical dilemma. His mother would arrive that afternoon, and he had an unavoidable meeting with the Tokyo investors. "I could reschedule," he said to Eleanor as they watched the children playing in the garden room. "The Nakamura group would understand a family emergency. They've flown halfway around the world specifically to meet with you," Eleanor reminded him. "And the children will be fine with me until your mother arrives." Dominic hesitated, watching as Theo carefully constructed a tower of blocks, while his sisters engaged in an elaborate game involving stuffed animals and what appeared to be a rescue mission. "They'll miss you," Eleanor said gently, "but they'll be here when you return. Children are remarkably resilient that way." Still, when the time came to leave, Dominic found himself reluctant to go. He knelt to explain to the triplets that he had an important meeting but would return as soon as possible, and that their grandmother, a new concept they found both exciting and slightly mysterious, would arrive while he was gone. "Will you come back before bedtime?" Madeline asked, her serious eyes searching his face. "I promise," Dominic said, the words feeling like a sacred vow. "Pinky promise?" Eliza demanded, holding out her tiny finger. Dominic, who had negotiated billion-dollar contracts with less gravity than he now felt, solemnly linked his pinky with hers. "Pinky promise." Theo, who had been quietly observing this exchange, suddenly stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Dominic's neck in a fierce hug. "Bye, Daddy," he whispered, the first time he had initiated physical affection. The simple gesture nearly undid Dominic completely. The meeting with the Nakamura group, normally the kind of high-stakes negotiation he excelled at, felt interminable. As the investors raised questions about timelines and materials and cultural considerations, Dominic found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to the children. Were they napping now? Had his mother arrived? Would Theo speak to her, or retreat into his usual shyness with strangers? Mr. Thorne. Mr. Nakamura's voice pulled him back to the present. You seem distracted today. Is everything all right with the project? Dominic considered his usual response. A smooth reassurance, a deflection, a return to business. Instead, he found himself saying, I apologize for my inattention. I recently discovered I have 3 children, triplets, and they're currently at my home with my mother, whom they've never met. I'm finding it difficult to focus on anything else. The stunned silence that followed was broken by Mr. Nakamura's unexpected laugh. Ah, children. They change everything, don't they? My own grandchildren have made me forget many important meetings. He smiled warmly. Perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow, when your mind is more settled. Dominic, who had never willingly ended a business meeting early in his life, found himself pathetically grateful for the reprieve. Thank you for your understanding. I would appreciate that. As his driver navigated the evening traffic toward home, Dominic's phone chimed with a text from his mother. They are absolutely perfect. Eliza has your father's laugh. Hurry home. The message sent an unexpected wave of emotion through him. His father had been gone for 30 years, but his mother still recognized echoes of him in these children she'd just met. The continuity of family, of legacy beyond buildings and awards, suddenly felt profoundly important in a way it never had before. When he arrived home, the scene that greeted him was unlike anything he could have imagined in his meticulously ordered life just days ago. His elegant living room, with its museum-quality art and pristine white furniture, had been transformed into what appeared to be a blanket fort of epic proportions. Sheets and throws were suspended from chairs and tables, creating a magical cave lit from within by what he suspected were the crystal table lamps that usually flanked his sofa. From inside the structure came the sound of his mother's voice, still rich and expressive at 72, reading what sounded like the Velveteen Rabbit with theatrical flourish. What makes you real isn't how you are made, she read. It's a thing that happens to you when someone loves you for a long, long time. Like Archie, came Theo's voice, clearer and more confident than Dominic had yet heard it. He's real because I love him. Exactly, his mother agreed. And like you are real to your daddy, even though he just met you. He's loved you for a long, long time, even before he knew you existed. The simple truth of her words stopped Dominic in his tracks. He had loved these children from the moment he saw them, not because they were perfect or accomplished or even well-behaved, but simply because they were his and Vivian's, created from the love he had tried so hard to deny but had never truly escaped. Daddy's home. Eliza's voice rang out as she spotted him from within the fort. Come see what Grandma helped us make. Dominic Thorne, who had presented designs to presidents and royalty without a hint of self-consciousness, found himself crawling on hands and knees into a blanket fort in his $3,000 suit, greeted by the delighted squeals of 3 pajama-clad children and the knowing smile of his mother. Welcome home, Margaret Thorne said, her eyes twinkling with amusement and something deeper. Pride, perhaps, or hope. We've been having quite the adventure. I can see that, Dominic replied, taking in the pile of books, the scattered stuffed animals, and the remains of what appeared to have been a picnic dinner inside the fort. I'm sorry I'm late. You're not late, his mother corrected gently. You're exactly on time. If you believe in second chances and the healing power of forgiveness, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that touch your heart. That night, after the children were finally asleep, a process that took considerably longer with the excitement of their grandmother's presence, Dominic and his mother sat in his study, sharing a bottle of wine and the kind of honest conversation they rarely had. She's done a remarkable job with them, Margaret observed. They're confident, curious, kind to each other. That doesn't happen by accident. No, Dominic agreed. Vivian is extraordinary. Always was. Then why did you let her go? The question was gentle but direct, as was his mother's way. Dominic swirled the wine in his glass, considering his answer. I told myself I was protecting her, that I couldn't give her what she needed, that I would eventually disappoint her. And the real reason? He met his mother's knowing gaze. I was terrified of how much I loved her, of how vulnerable that made me. After Dad died, you and I both know I built walls. Vivian was the only one who ever truly breached them, and that felt dangerous, his mother supplied. Like losing your father all over again. Yes, the admission cost him, but it was time for honesty. I convinced myself it was better to end things on my terms than to risk her leaving when she finally saw the truth about me. And what truth is that? That I'm emotionally stunted, incapable of the kind of openness she deserved. Margaret Thorne studied her son for a long moment. Do you know what I see when I look at you with those children? A man who is anything but emotionally stunted. I see tenderness, patience, joy, all the things you've convinced yourself you're incapable of. That's different, Dominic protested. They're children. They make it easy. No, his mother countered firmly. They make it necessary. There's a difference. You've always had these capacities, Dominic. You've simply chosen not to exercise them with adults because adults can hurt you in ways children can't. At least, that's what you've told yourself. Her words struck uncomfortably close to home. It may be too late anyway, he said after a moment. Vivian has built a life without me. She only reached out because she had no other option for childcare. Perhaps, his mother allowed. Or perhaps this is an opportunity. One you shouldn't waste out of pride or fear. The next few days fell into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. With his mother's help, Dominic navigated the complexities of parenthood with growing confidence. He learned each child's preferences and quirks, discovered the magic of impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, experienced the peculiar pride of watching Theo finally master the monkey bars at the park. By Saturday morning, pancake day, he felt almost competent as he mixed batter and heated the griddle under Eliza's critical supervision. More vanilla, she instructed, standing on a chair beside him. Mama always puts an extra. Like this? He asked, adding another splash to the mixture. Perfect, she declared after a serious taste test of the raw batter, which he suspected Vivian would not have approved. As they worked together, Dominic found himself wondering what Vivian was doing at that moment in Chicago. Was the structural issue resolved? When would she return? And what would happen when she did? The questions had been circling in his mind all week, growing more insistent as he fell deeper in love with these three small humans who had upended his carefully ordered existence. His phone rang, Vivian's name appearing on the screen for the first time in 3 years. His heart stuttered as he answered, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since their first date. Dominic. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, warm, slightly husky, with the hint of a Virginia accent she'd never quite lost despite years in Washington. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. We're making pancakes, he replied, watching as Eliza attempted to pour batter into a Mickey Mouse shape, or attempting to, at least. A soft laugh. Ambitious for your first week of fatherhood. How's Chicago? He asked, moving slightly away from the children for privacy. Complicated. The structural issue is more serious than initially reported. I've been working around the clock with the engineering team. She paused. How are they? The children? They're wonderful, Dominic said simply. Perfect, actually. You've done an amazing job with them, Vivian. Another pause, longer this time. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. The formality between them felt strange after the intimacy they had once shared, after the children they had created together. When will you be back? He asked, the question that had been foremost in his mind all week. That's why I'm calling. The situation here is worse than expected. I need to stay at least another week, possibly 2. Her voice held genuine regret. I know it's a lot to ask, especially given the circumstances, but it's fine, Dominic interrupted. They can stay as long as necessary. My mother is here helping, and we're managing well. Your mother? Surprise colored Vivian's voice. Margaret is there? She came down from Boston as soon as she heard about the triplets. They've bonded instantly. I'm glad, Vivian said softly. They should know their grandmother. The implication hung between them, that perhaps they should have known her all along, that the separation Vivian had maintained had cost the children relationships they deserved to have. Vivian, Dominic began, not entirely sure what he wanted to say, but feeling the need to address the elephant in the room. We should talk about Daddy, Eliza called urgently. The pancake is burning. I have to go, he said quickly. Pancake emergency. Call me later, or I can call you. Yes, Vivian agreed. Tonight, after they're asleep, we do need to talk. As he hung up and rushed to rescue the smoking pancake, Dominic felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. What would he say to her? What could he say that would bridge the 3-year chasm between them, that would acknowledge both his mistakes and hers, that would create a path forward for the sake of their children? The day passed in a blur of activity: a trip to the Children's Museum, lunch at a cafe that catered specifically to families, a concept Dominic had never even considered before this week, an impromptu stop at a toy store where his usual financial restraint abandoned him completely in the face of 3 hopeful faces. By evening, as his mother supervised bath time, Dominic found himself in his study, rehearsing what he would say to Vivian when she called. Should he lead with an apology for ending their relationship so abruptly, or address her decision to keep the children from him? Should he focus on practical co-parenting arrangements going forward, or dare to suggest something more? The questions swirled in his mind, none with easy answers. But one thing had become crystal clear over the past week. He needed to be part of his children's lives, not as a weekend father or a distant financial provider, but as a true parent present and engaged in all the messy, wonderful, ordinary moments that made up their days. And if he was honest with himself, he wanted Vivian back in his life too. The woman who had challenged him, inspired him, loved him despite his flaws. The woman who had created a family from the wreckage of their relationship, who had raised 3 extraordinary children while building her own successful career. The woman he had never stopped loving, though he'd spent 3 years trying to convince himself otherwise. When his phone rang at 9:37 p.m., Dominic answered on the first ring. They're asleep, he said by way of greeting. All 3 finally down after 3 stories and multiple negotiations about night lights. Vivian's soft laugh warmed him even through the digital distance. Let me guess. Eliza tried to bargain for just one more story. Madeline wanted to make sure everyone had exactly the same number of goodnight kisses, and Theo needed Archie positioned just right. Exactly that, Dominic confirmed, smiling at her perfect understanding of their children. You know them so well. I've had 3 years of practice, she replied, her tone gentle rather than accusatory. They're creatures of habit in many ways. A brief silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. Vivian, he began, just as she said, Dominic. They both stopped. Then Vivian said, You first. Dominic took a deep breath. I owe you an apology. Several, actually, for how I ended our relationship, for not being honest about my feelings, for putting my fear above what could have been. And I owe you an apology for not telling you about the pregnancy, Vivian responded quietly. You had a right to know, regardless of our personal situation. Why didn't you? The question that had haunted him all week finally voiced. A long pause. The morning you ended things was the morning I confirmed the pregnancy. I'd gone to the doctor before meeting you at the penthouse. I was so excited, so certain you'd be happy about it despite your usual reservations about family. Her voice caught slightly. Then you told me you didn't love me anymore, that I deserved someone who could give me what I needed. It felt like the universe's cruelest joke. I lied, Dominic admitted, the words painful but necessary. I did love you. I was terrified of how much I loved you, of how vulnerable that made me. I told myself I was protecting you from eventual disappointment, but really, I was protecting myself from potential loss. I suspected as much, Vivian said softly. But by the time I was thinking clearly again, weeks had passed. You'd made it clear you wanted a clean break. No contact, no loose ends. I told myself that if you couldn't handle a relationship with me, you certainly couldn't handle triplets. I might not have, Dominic acknowledged, his honesty surprising even himself. 3 years ago I was different, more rigid, more controlled, more afraid. And now, the question hung between them, simple yet profound. Now I've spent a week with 3 extraordinary children who've shown me what really matters, who've made me laugh and worry and feel more deeply than I have in years, who've made me realize what I've been missing, not just with them, but in my life generally. He paused, gathering courage. Who've made me remember how it felt to be with you. Vivian's intake of breath was audible through the phone. Dominic, I'm not asking for anything, he clarified quickly. I know 3 years is a long time. You've built a life without me, a successful career, a beautiful family. I just want you to know that I'm grateful for this week, for the chance to know our children, and that I'd like to be part of their lives going forward, in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. Of course you'll be part of their lives, Vivian said immediately. They're your children too. They deserve to have their father, and from what Eleanor tells me, you've taken to fatherhood remarkably well. Eleanor's been reporting to you? Dominic asked, surprised. Daily updates, Vivian confirmed, a smile in her voice, complete with photographic evidence of pancake disasters and blanket fort construction. The knowledge that she'd been keeping such close tabs on their week together gave him a strange hope. The children miss you, he said. They talk about you constantly. Mama does it this way is practically their mantra. I miss them too, Vivian admitted, her voice thick with emotion. This is the longest I've been away from them since they were born. It's harder than I expected. They're thriving, Dominic assured her. Happy, healthy, adjusting well to the changes. You've given them such a solid foundation that they can handle this temporary separation. Thank you for saying that. The gratitude in her voice was genuine. It helps to hear. Another silence fell, more comfortable this time. So what happens when you come back? Dominic finally asked, the question that had been circling in his mind all week. I don't know, Vivian admitted. I hadn't thought beyond the immediate crisis. I suppose we'll need to establish some kind of formal custody arrangement, visitation schedules, that sort of thing. The practical, logical approach, so like the Vivian he remembered, always facing challenges head-on with clear-eyed pragmatism. Yes, of course, he agreed. But I meant, what happens with us? The question hung between them, weighted with 3 years of separation, with hurt and regret, with the undeniable connection that had created 3 perfect children. I don't know that either, Vivian said softly. I never expected to hear you say you still had feelings for me. I've spent 3 years convincing myself that chapter was closed permanently. And did you succeed? Dominic asked, holding his breath for her answer. Not entirely, she admitted after a long pause. The children look so much like you. Every day I see your eyes, your expressions, your mannerisms reflected in them. It's been challenging to truly move on when I'm surrounded by reminders. The revelation sent a surge of hope through him. When you come back, could we talk in person about everything? Yes, Vivian agreed. We should. For the children's sake, if nothing else. For their sake, Dominic echoed, though in his heart he hoped for more. They deserve parents who can communicate effectively, regardless of their personal relationship. Exactly. A pause then, I should go. I have an early meeting with the structural engineers tomorrow. Of course, call when you can. The children would love to hear your voice. I will. Good night, Dominic. Good night, Vivian. As he ended the call, Dominic felt lighter than he had in years. The conversation hadn't resolved everything. Far from it. But it had opened a door he'd thought permanently closed. A door to possibility, to potential, to a future he hadn't dared imagine until this week. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Mornings with the children, afternoons split between work and family time, evenings filled with dinner, baths, stories, and the occasional video call with Vivian, whose face lit up at the sight of her children even through the digital screen. Dominic watched these interactions with a mixture of joy and wistfulness, noting how Vivian's entire demeanor softened when she spoke to the triplets, how her laugh came more easily, how her eyes sparkled with love and pride. She had always been beautiful, but motherhood had added a depth to her beauty that took his breath away. This was a Vivian he hadn't known, confident in a new way, grounded in purpose, radiating the quiet strength that came from creating and nurturing life. "You're staring," his mother observed one evening after the children had said goodnight to Vivian and gone upstairs for their bath. "Am I?" Dominic asked, not bothering to deny it. "You look at her the same way you did 5 years ago, when you first brought her to Boston to meet me," Margaret said gently. "Like she's a rare architectural marvel you can't quite believe exists." The description was apartment Vivian had always inspired that sense of wonder in him. Her mind, her talent, her capacity for joy and creation. It was one of the things that had terrified him most about loving her. The fear that something so precious couldn't possibly last, that he would inevitably lose her one way or another. "I made a terrible mistake letting her go," he admitted to his mother. "I'm not sure there's any coming back from it." "There's always a way back to love," Margaret replied with the wisdom of her 72 years. "It may not look the same as before. It may require more work, more honesty, more courage. But if it's real, there's always a path." The next morning brought unexpected news. Vivian would be returning the following day. The structural issues in Chicago had been temporarily stabilized, allowing her to come home for the weekend before returning for the final phase of repairs. "She'll be here tomorrow afternoon," Dominic told the children over breakfast, watching their faces light up with excitement. "Mama's coming home," Eliza shouted, bouncing in her seat. "Will she stay here with us?" The innocent question highlighted a practical issue Dominic hadn't considered. Where would Vivian stay? Would she take the children back to their home immediately? Would she expect to stay in his house temporarily? "I'm not sure about the arrangements yet," he answered honestly. "But she'll be here to see you, and that's what matters." As the children raced off to help Eleanor prepare for Vivian's arrival, a process that seemed to involve making welcome home cards and deciding which toys to show her first, Dominic found himself facing a wave of anxiety he hadn't anticipated. For a week, he had been the primary parent, the center of the children's world. Tomorrow, Vivian would return. The mother they adored, the constant in their lives for 3 years. Where would that leave him? How would they navigate this new dynamic, this sudden shift from separate lives to forced cooperation? "You're overthinking again," his mother observed, joining him at the breakfast table with a fresh cup of coffee. "I can practically hear the gears turning." "I just want to get this right," Dominic admitted. "For the children's sake." "And for Vivian's?" Margaret asked perceptively. "And perhaps your own?" "All of the above," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've spent a week falling in love with being a father. I don't want to lose that when she returns." "You won't," his mother assured him. "Those children adore you already. And Vivian doesn't strike me as the type to deny them a relationship with their father, especially now that she's seen how well you've taken to parenthood." "No, she wouldn't," Dominic agreed. Vivian had always been fair to a fault, even when it cost her personally. But things will change. They have to. "Change isn't always loss," Margaret reminded him gently. "Sometimes it's growth. Sometimes it's opportunity. Sometimes it's the universe giving you exactly what you need, even if it's not what you expected." The wisdom in her words stayed with him throughout the day as he made preparations for Vivian's arrival. He had Eleanor prepare the guest suite with fresh flowers and Vivian's favorite scented candles, still remembered after 3 years. He arranged for her favorite meal to be delivered from the Italian restaurant they had once frequented together. He even found himself straightening his already immaculate home with unusual attention to detail. "You're nervous," Eleanor observed as she caught him rearranging the books in the living room for the 3rd time. "I haven't seen you this anxious since the Beijing Olympic Commission presentation." "I'm not nervous," Dominic protested automatically. Then, with a rueful smile, I'm terrified. She'll be pleased with how you've cared for the children, Eleanor assured him. That's what matters most to her. I know. And he knew that Vivian's primary concern would always be the triplets' well-being. It was one of the countless things he admired about her. The next day dawned bright and clear, a perfect autumn Saturday that seemed designed for reunions. The children were up at dawn, too excited to sleep, their energy filling the house with a chaotic joy that would have irritated Dominic just weeks ago, but now felt like the most natural soundtrack to his life. When will Mama be here? Theo asked for the dozenth time as they finished lunch. Her flight lands at 2, Dominic explained patiently. Then she needs to get her luggage and take a car from the airport, so probably around 3:30. That's forever, Eliza groaned dramatically, flopping onto the sofa. It's 3 hours, Madeline corrected, always the practical one. We can watch Frozen and then do our special pictures for Mama, and then she'll be here. The children's artwork was spread across the dining table, elaborate welcome home cards featuring what appeared to be stick figures of varying heights, the family, and a large rectangle, presumably the house. This is you, Theo explained, pointing to the tallest stick figure in his drawing. And this is Mama, and these are us, and this is Grandma. We're all at your house together. The simple image of family unity, drawn with a child's innocent hope, tightened Dominic's throat with emotion. It's perfect, Theo. Mama will love it. At precisely 3:27 p.m., the security system announced a car at the gate. The children, who had been watching out the window for the past hour, erupted in cheers. She's here. Mama's here. They raced to the front door, bouncing with excitement as Eleanor tried to maintain some semblance of order. Dominic hung back slightly, suddenly uncertain of his place in this reunion. And then the door opened and Vivian was there. Her copper hair caught in the autumn sunlight, her face tired but radiant as she dropped to her knees to gather all 3 children into her arms at once. My loves, she murmured, pressing kisses to each small face. I've missed you so much. We missed you too, Mama, Eliza exclaimed. But Daddy made pancakes and took us to his work and Grandma came and we built a fort and… Slow down, sweetheart. Vivian laughed, the sound warming the air around them. I want to hear everything, but one thing at a time. As she looked up from the children, her eyes met Dominic's for the first time in 3 years. The connection was immediate and electric, a current of recognition and shared history that transcended their separation. Dominic, she said softly, rising to her feet with Theo still clinging to her side. Thank you for taking such good care of them. They made it easy, he replied, echoing what he'd told Amelia days earlier. They're extraordinary children. A smile touched her lips. They are, aren't they? The moments stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and complicated emotions. Then Margaret appeared in the hallway, breaking the tension. Vivian, she said warmly, stepping forward to embrace the younger woman. It's wonderful to see you again, though the circumstances are certainly unexpected. Margaret. Vivian returned the embrace with genuine affection. Thank you for coming. The children have talked non-stop about their adventures with Grandma. It's been my pleasure, Margaret assured her. They're absolute treasures. As they moved into the living room, the children competing to show Vivian their artwork and tell her about their week, Dominic found himself studying her with new eyes. She looked tired, dark circles beneath her eyes suggesting the long hours she'd mentioned in Chicago, but also somehow more vibrant than he remembered, more present, more grounded in herself. Motherhood had changed her, just as this week of fatherhood had begun to change him. They were different people now than they had been 3 years ago, shaped by separate journeys and separate challenges. Yet watching her with their children, seeing the love that flowed so naturally between them, Dominic felt a connection deeper than anything they'd shared before. This was Vivian as she was meant to be, strong, nurturing, radiantly alive in her purpose. And these children were the living embodiment of what they had created together, of the love that had existed between them despite his fear and her pride. The afternoon passed in a blur of stories and laughter, the children eager to share every detail of their week with their mother. Dominic watched as Vivian listened with complete attention, asking questions, expressing delight at their adventures, reassuring them about her absence. "Will you stay here tonight, Mama?" Madeline asked as dinner was being served. "There's room in our bedroom for another bed." Vivian glanced at Dominic, a question in her eyes. "I hadn't thought that far ahead, sweetheart. I should probably take you all home to our house." "But we like it here," Eliza protested. "Daddy's house is big and Grandma is here, and we have the fort in the living room." "Fort?" Vivian asked, raising an eyebrow at Dominic. "A structural marvel," he replied with a small smile. "Load-bearing capabilities questionable, but aesthetic appeal undeniable." Her laugh, spontaneous and genuine, sent a wave of warmth through him. How long had it been since he'd made her laugh like that? How many moments of simple joy had he missed in his determination to protect himself from potential pain? "You're welcome to stay," he offered quietly. "The guest suite is prepared. It would give you more time with the children without the disruption of moving them tonight." Vivian considered this, her expression thoughtful. "That's very kind. If you're sure it's not an imposition." "Not at all," Dominic assured her, aware of his mother and Eleanor exchanging glances across the table. "It makes the most sense for the children." "For the children," Vivian echoed, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "Then yes, thank you. I'll stay tonight." The decision made, dinner continued with the cheerful chaos that seemed to accompany all meals with 3-year-olds. Dominic found himself watching Vivian. The graceful way she cut Theo's food into manageable pieces, her patient responses to Eliza's endless questions, the gentle reminders to Madeline about sitting properly in her chair. She made motherhood look effortless, though he knew from his week of experience that it was anything but. The realization deepened his already profound respect for what she had accomplished these past 3 years, raising triplets while building a career, all without the support he should have provided. After dinner, as the children led Vivian on a grand tour of the blanket fort, now expanded to include most of the living room, Dominic retreated to the kitchen under the pretense of helping Eleanor with cleanup. "You're hiding," his mother observed, joining him at the sink where he was unnecessarily rinsing dishes that would go into the dishwasher. "I'm giving them time together," Dominic corrected. "They've missed her. And you're afraid of being alone with her," Margaret continued, undeterred. "Afraid of the conversation you know you need to have." Sometimes his mother's perceptiveness was deeply inconvenient. "It's complicated. Life usually is," she agreed. "But avoiding complications doesn't make them disappear. It just postpones the inevitable." Before Dominic could respond, Eliza appeared in the doorway. "Daddy, Mama says it's bath time. She says you can help if you want." The simple invitation to participate in this ordinary family ritual felt monumental somehow. "I'd like that," he said, drying his hands on a towel. "If your mother doesn't mind." "She said to ask you," Eliza reported, already turning to race back to her siblings. "Hurry up. I want the purple bubbles." Bath time with 2 adults proved both easier and more complicated than Dominic's solo attempts had been. Easier because there was an extra pair of hands to manage soap and shampoo and the constant danger of water escaping the tub. More complicated because of the acute awareness of Vivian beside him, their arms occasionally brushing as they helped the children, the domestic intimacy of the scene at odds with the unresolved tension between them. "You've gotten quite good at this," Vivian observed as Dominic expertly wrapped Theo in a towel, the technique he'd perfected over the past week, ensuring maximum coverage with minimum struggle. "I've had excellent teachers," he replied, nodding toward the children. "They're very clear about what works and what doesn't." "They do have strong opinions," Vivian agreed with a smile, helping Madeline into her pajamas. "Especially Eliza. I wonder where she gets that from," Dominic said, the teasing comment slipping out before he could consider its appropriateness. But Vivian just laughed, the sound warming the steamy bathroom. Certainly not from her father, who has never had a strong opinion about anything in his life. The gentle sarcasm, so reminiscent of their earlier relationship, eased something in Dominic's chest. Perhaps they could find their way back to at least a friendly co-parenting relationship, if nothing more. Bedtime followed its now familiar routine, though with Vivian present. The children were more excited than usual, requiring extra stories and songs before finally settling down. Dominic found himself hanging back slightly, allowing Vivian to lead the ritual she had established over 3 years. "One more story, Mama," Eliza pleaded, even as her eyes grew heavy. "Please." "Not tonight, sweetheart," Vivian said firmly. "You've already had 3 and it's late. But Daddy can read to you tomorrow night. Promise?" Eliza asked, turning to Dominic with sleepy insistence. "Promise," he confirmed, the simple commitment filling him with unexpected joy. Tomorrow night. He would still be part of their bedtime routine tomorrow. As the children finally drifted off to sleep, Vivian and Dominic retreated from the room, closing the door softly behind them. "They'll be out until morning now," Vivian said, her voice low. "The excitement of today has worn them out completely. Would you like a glass of wine?" Dominic offered, suddenly nervous about being alone with her, without the buffer of children or his mother, who had tactfully retired to her room earlier. "That would be nice," Vivian agreed. "It's been a long week." In his study, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the illuminated gardens, Dominic poured 2 glasses of the Bordeaux he remembered she preferred. Vivian accepted hers with a murmured thanks, moving to stand by the windows. "Your home is beautiful," she observed, gazing out at the carefully designed landscape. "Very you. Too much me, perhaps," Dominic admitted, joining her at the window. "The children have made me realize how sterile it was before. All clean lines and perfect symmetry, but no warmth, no life." Vivian turned to look at him, surprise evident in her expression. "That's not something I expected to hear from you." "I've had something of an awakening this week," Dominic said quietly. "About what matters, what doesn't, what I've been missing without even realizing it." A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words and shared history. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dominic finally asked, the question that had haunted him since the moment he saw the triplets. "About the pregnancy. About them." Vivian sighed, her gaze returning to the darkened garden. "I told myself it was because you'd made it clear you didn't want a future with me. That telling you would only complicate an already painful situation." She took a sip of wine before continuing. "But if I'm being completely honest, pride played a role too. You hurt me, Dominic, deeply. And part of me wanted to prove I didn't need you, that I could do it all on my own." "You certainly proved that," Dominic acknowledged, no bitterness in his tone, only respect. "What you've accomplished is remarkable. 3 healthy, happy, well-adjusted children. A successful firm. A life built entirely on your terms." "It hasn't been easy," Vivian admitted. "There were nights I was so exhausted I cried while folding laundry at 2 a.m. Days when I thought I'd made a terrible mistake trying to balance motherhood and career. Moments when I almost called you, almost told you about them. Why didn't you? Fear, I suppose. Fear that you'd reject them as you'd rejected me. Or worse, that you'd only want them out of obligation, not love." She met his gaze directly. "I couldn't bear the thought of them experiencing the kind of emotional distance I'd felt from you." The honesty hurt, but Dominic couldn't deny the truth in her words. 3 years ago, he might well have responded exactly as she feared, with dutiful financial support but emotional detachment, with scheduled visitations that felt more like business appointments than family time. "I understand," he said finally. "I don't agree with your decision, but I understand it. And perhaps you were right. Perhaps I wasn't ready then. And now?" Vivian asked, the question hanging between them. "Now I can't imagine my life without them," Dominic answered honestly. "They've changed everything, Vivian. How I see the world. How I see myself. How I understand what matters." "Children have a way of doing that," she agreed with a small smile. "They strip away pretense, force you to be present, to be real." "Like the Velveteen Rabbit," Dominic said, remembering his mother's reading in the blanket fort. "Real isn't how you're made. It's what happens when someone loves you for a long, long time." Surprise and something softer flickered across Vivian's face. "You remember that story?" My mother was reading it to them in the fort, Dominic explained. It seemed relevant. Another silence fell, more comfortable this time. So what happens now? Vivian asked finally, echoing his question from their phone conversation. With the children, I mean. I'd like to be part of their lives, Dominic said immediately. Not just weekends or holidays, but really involved. I know I have a lot to learn, but I want to be their father in every sense of the word. I want that too, Vivian assured him. They deserve to have you in their lives. And you've already proven you're more than capable. We'll need to work out logistics, Dominic continued, slipping into the practical planning that had always been his comfort zone. Living arrangements, schedules, educational decisions. Yes, Vivian agreed, though I'll need to return to Chicago next week to finish the structural repairs. It could be another 2 weeks before that project is fully stabilized. The children can stay here, Dominic offered without hesitation. My mother has extended her visit indefinitely, and Eleanor is invaluable. Between us, we can manage until you return. Gratitude softened Vivian's expression. Thank you. That would be a tremendous help. I've been worried about disrupting their routine again so soon. It's the least I can do, Dominic said. After everything you've done alone for 3 years. Vivian studied him for a long moment, her head tilted slightly in the way he remembered from their earliest days together, when she was trying to understand a particularly complex design problem. You've changed, she said finally. There's a softness to you now that wasn't there before. The children, Dominic acknowledged. They make it impossible to maintain the walls I've spent a lifetime building. Children have a way of finding the cracks in our armor, Vivian agreed. Of reaching the parts of ourselves we try to keep hidden. The conversation lulled again, both of them sipping their wine and watching the moonlight play across the garden. The silence between them had always been comfortable, even in the early days of their relationship. Vivian had never felt the need to fill empty spaces with meaningless chatter, had understood his appreciation for quiet contemplation. It was one of the countless things he had loved about her. One of the countless things he had missed. I should get some rest, Vivian said finally, setting down her empty glass. It's been a long week, and the children will be up at dawn, excited to have both of us here. Of course, Dominic agreed, though he was reluctant to end their conversation. Eleanor will have prepared everything you need in the guest suite. As they walked together through the quiet house, Dominic found himself hyper-aware of Vivian beside him. The subtle scent of her perfume, still the same after all these years. The graceful way she moved, the copper highlights in her hair caught by the soft hallway lighting. At the door to the guest suite, she paused, turning to face him. Thank you, Dominic, not just for tonight, but for everything this week. For stepping up as their father without hesitation. For loving them so quickly and completely. How could I not? He asked simply. They're perfect. Like their mother. The words slipped out before he could censor them. Too honest, too revealing of feelings he hadn't intended to express so soon. Vivian's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't comment on his slip. Good night, Dominic. Good night, Vivian. As he walked to his own room, Dominic realized that for the first time in 3 years, his house felt like a home, filled with the presence of his children, his mother, and now Vivian. The emptiness that had been his constant companion since their breakup had been replaced by something warm and vital and real. Whatever happened between him and Vivian going forward, he would never return to the sterile existence he had accepted as normal for so long. The children had changed him too profoundly for that. Tag a sister who needs to hear that sometimes life's greatest blessings come after our deepest pain. The next morning arrived with the now familiar sounds of children waking, whispered conversations that grew progressively louder, small feet padding across hardwood floors, the inevitable squabble over a shared toy. What was unfamiliar was the sound of Vivian's voice joining the morning chorus, her gentle shoo. Let's be quiet until everyone's awake, doing little to actually reduce the volume. Dominic found himself smiling as he rose, the knowledge that his entire family was under one roof filling him with a contentment he had never expected to feel. In the kitchen, he discovered Vivian already preparing breakfast, the children helping, in ways that created more mess than progress. "Good morning," she greeted him, a streak of flour across one cheek as she mixed pancake batter. "We thought we'd surprise you with breakfast, but it seems the surprise has been spoiled." "I'm surprised nonetheless," Dominic assured her, taking in the domestic scene with wonder. "And impressed. Pancakes have proven to be beyond my culinary capabilities." "Daddy made blob pancakes," Eliza informed her mother with brutal honesty. "They tasted okay though." "High praise indeed," Vivian laughed, the sound warming the kitchen. "Would you like to try again today? I can guide you through the proper technique." The offer to teach him, to include him in this family ritual, felt significant somehow. "I'd like that," Dominic said, moving to join her at the counter. What followed was a lesson in pancake artistry, with Vivian demonstrating how to control the batter flow to create recognizable shapes. Under her guidance, Dominic managed a passable turtle and what Theo generously identified as an elephant, though it looked more like an amorphous blob with a trunk. "Not bad for a beginner," Vivian encouraged, her shoulder brushing his as they worked side by side. "You have potential." The casual contact, the easy camaraderie, the shared smiles over the children's enthusiasm. All of it felt so natural, so right, that Dominic found himself imagining a future where mornings like this were the norm rather than the exception. But as they sat down to eat, reality intruded in the form of Vivian's ringing phone. The Chicago project, requiring her immediate attention for a video conference with the engineering team. "I'm so sorry," she apologized, rising from the table. "This will take at least an hour. The main support column is showing new stress fractures." "Go," Dominic assured her. "We'll finish breakfast and clean up. Your work is important." The grateful smile she gave him before hurrying to her room with her phone reinforced his growing understanding of the balancing act she had performed for 3 years. Motherhood and career, family and professional responsibility, always juggling, always prioritizing, always making impossible choices. "Is Mama working?" Madeline asked as Vivian disappeared down the hallway. "Yes," Dominic confirmed. "She has to help fix a building that has some problems. It's very important work." "Mama builds things that help people," Theo said seriously. "She makes houses for families who don't have enough money." This was news to Dominic. "She does." "Aha!" Eliza nodded vigorously. "She says everybody deserves a beautiful place to live, even if they don't have lots of dollars." The simple explanation revealed a side of Vivian's work he hadn't known about. A focus on affordable housing, on using her considerable talent to serve those with limited resources. It was so perfectly in character with the woman he had loved, yet represented a professional evolution he had missed entirely. When Vivian rejoined them an hour later, apologetic and slightly harried, Dominic found himself seeing her with new appreciation. "The children were telling me about your affordable housing projects," he said as they cleared the breakfast dishes together. The triplets now engaged in an elaborate game in the garden room under Eleanor's supervision. "That sounds like meaningful work." "It is," Vivian confirmed, a passion entering her voice that he remembered well from their early days together. "After I left Thorne Architectural Group, I wanted to focus on projects that made a tangible difference in people's lives. The Lakefront Commons in Chicago is actually a mixed-income development, luxury units subsidizing affordable family homes, all with the same quality of design and materials." "That's remarkable," Dominic said sincerely, "and exactly the kind of vision you always had, even when we were working together. You saw architecture as a way to improve lives, not just create monuments." Surprise flickered across Vivian's face. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about working with you," Dominic admitted. "Your perspective changed how I approach design, though I'm not sure I ever told you that," Dominic continued. "You brought humanity to my precision, warmth to my technical expertise. The Singapore Tower wouldn't have won that international award without your input on the community spaces." Vivian paused, a plate still in her hands, clearly caught off guard by his candor. "You never said that before." "I should have," Dominic acknowledged. "I took your contributions for granted in many ways, both professionally and personally. It's one of my many regrets." Before Vivian could respond, Eliza burst into the kitchen, effectively ending the moment of unexpected intimacy. Daddy, Mama, Grandma says we can go to the zoo today. Can we? Please. The day unfolded with the chaotic joy that seemed to accompany all family outings with 3-year-olds. The National Zoo became the backdrop for what felt to Dominic like the most perfect day of his life. Walking between Vivian and his mother, a child holding each of their hands, Theo perched on his shoulders to better see the elephants. Real ones, not pancake versions. Watching Vivian with the children in this public setting revealed new dimensions of her motherhood. The way she anticipated potential dangers before they arose. Her endless patience with Eliza's constant questions. The gentle firmness with which she handled Madeline's meltdown when the butterfly pavilion closed before they could enter. You make it look so easy, Dominic observed as they shared a bench, while the children explored a nearby playground under Margaret's watchful eye. It's not, Vivian assured him with a tired smile. But you learn as you go. Develop instincts. Find rhythms that work. I have a lot to learn, Dominic acknowledged. You're doing remarkably well for someone who's been a father for all of 8 days, Vivian said, genuine approval in her voice. The children adore you already. They make it easy to love them, Dominic replied. Then, gathering his courage, they're so much like you, Vivian. Your spirit, your curiosity, your determination. Even when I didn't know they existed, they were bringing you back into my life every day. Vivian's expression softened, vulnerability replacing her usual composed demeanor. I've seen you in them from the beginning. Theo has your thoughtfulness, the way you observe everything before speaking. Madeline has your precision, your attention to detail. And Eliza, she laughed softly. Eliza has your stubbornness, though you'd probably call it determination. A much more flattering term, Dominic agreed with a smile. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the years of separation seemed to fall away. They were simply two people who had created life together, who shared the profound love for these 3 extraordinary children. I've missed you, Dominic said quietly, the admission costing him more than any business negotiation ever had. Not just this week, but for 3 years. Every day. Vivian's breath caught, her eyes widening slightly. Dominic, you don't need to say anything, he assured her quickly. I'm not asking for anything or expecting anything. I just wanted you to know. I made a terrible mistake letting you go, and not a day has passed that I haven't regretted it. Before Vivian could respond, Eliza came running over, demanding they watch her go down the big slide. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. An honesty that hadn't existed before. A door opened that had previously been firmly closed. The rest of the weekend passed in a similar fashion, with family outings and quiet moments at home. The children reveling in having both parents present, Dominic and Vivian gradually finding their way toward a new kind of relationship. Not quite the lovers they had been, but more than the distant co-parents they might have become. On Sunday evening, as they prepared for Vivian's early morning departure back to Chicago, Dominic found her in the garden room, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. The children are finally asleep, he said, joining her by the windows. 3 stories and 2 songs later. They're stalling, Vivian said with a soft laugh. They know I'm leaving again tomorrow. They'll be all right, Dominic assured her. We managed well this past week, and now they understand you'll be coming back. I know, she sighed, wrapping her arms around herself. It's still hard to leave them. I've never been away from them for so long before. They're in good hands, Dominic promised, and we'll video call every day, just like this past week. Vivian turned to face him, her expression serious. Thank you, Dominic, for everything, for stepping up as their father without hesitation, for making this difficult situation so much easier than it could have been. You don't need to thank me for being their father, Dominic said. It's who I am now, who I want to be. Still, Vivian insisted. Many men would have reacted very differently to discovering they had 3 children they never knew about. With anger, with resentment, with legal threats. You've been extraordinary. The compliment warmed him, but Dominic shook his head. I've simply been doing what anyone should do in this situation. Putting the children first. Learning to be a parent. Trying to make up for lost time. A comfortable silence fell between them, both watching the gentle sway of trees in the night breeze. About what you said yesterday, Vivian began hesitantly. About missing me. I meant it, Dominic said simply. But I don't expect anything from you, Vivian. You've built a life without me, a successful career, a beautiful family. I'm grateful for whatever role you're willing to let me play in our children's lives going forward. What if I want more than that? Vivian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic turned to her, hardly daring to hope he'd understood correctly. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've missed you too, Vivian admitted, meeting his gaze directly. That seeing you with our children this weekend has shown me a side of you I always hoped existed but wasn't sure did. That perhaps we both have some healing to do, some trust to rebuild, but that I'm open to the possibility of something. I don't know what exactly, but something more than just co-parenting. Joy surged through Dominic, tempered by caution born of hard experience. Are you sure? After everything that happened between us? I'm not sure of anything, Vivian said honestly, except that our children deserve parents who at least try to find a way forward together. And that despite everything, despite 3 years apart, despite the hurt and the mistakes on both sides, there's still something between us worth exploring. Dominic reached for her hand, a gesture both tentative and hopeful. I'd like that, to explore what might be possible now with who we are today, not who we were 3 years ago. Vivian's fingers intertwined with his, the simple contact sending warmth through his entire body. Slowly, she cautioned, one step at a time. The children have to be our priority. Always, Dominic agreed. They come first in everything. As they stood together in the moonlight, hands linked, the promise of a new beginning hanging between them, Dominic felt a sense of rightness he had never experienced before. Whatever happened between them going forward, whether friendship or partnership or something more, they would face it together, united by the 3 perfect children sleeping upstairs. The next morning brought tearful goodbyes as Vivian prepared to return to Chicago. The children clung to her, extracting multiple promises about daily video calls and her swift return. Be good for Daddy and Grandma, she instructed, kneeling to embrace all 3 at once. I'll be back as soon as I can. We'll be fine, Dominic assured her, touched by the children's obvious devotion to their mother. Take the time you need to finish the project properly. We'll be here when you return. As Vivian's car pulled away, Dominic felt a momentary pang of loss, quickly replaced by determination. He would use these next 2 weeks to continue building his relationship with the children, to prepare for whatever future they might create together as a family. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Mornings with the children, afternoons split between work and family time, evenings filled with dinner, baths, stories, and the nightly video call with Vivian, whose face lit up at the sight of her children even through the digital screen. But now there were additional calls after the children were asleep, private conversations between Dominic and Vivian that stretched late into the night. They talked about the children, of course, but also about their work, their dreams, the people they had become during their 3 years apart. Slowly, cautiously, they began to rebuild the connection that had once bound them together, this time on a foundation of honesty and shared purpose, rather than the passionate, but ultimately fragile bond of their earlier relationship. I was thinking, Dominic said during one such call, a week after Vivian's departure, when you return, perhaps we should consider a more permanent arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Vivian asked, caution evident in her tone. The guest house on the property, Dominic explained. It's fully equipped, with 3 bedrooms and its own garden. You and the children could live there, maintaining your independence but allowing us to co-parent more easily. The children would have stability, access to both of us, and you would have space for your work. Silence greeted his suggestion, long enough that he began to worry he'd overstepped. That's actually a thoughtful idea, Vivian said finally. It would solve many practical issues. But are you sure? It's a significant change from your solitary lifestyle. My solitary lifestyle ended the moment 3 children called me Daddy, Dominic pointed out with a smile. And I have no desire to return to it. I want them in my daily life, Vivian. And you, in whatever capacity makes sense for us going forward. Let me think about it, she requested. It's a big decision, for all of us. Of course, Dominic agreed. No pressure, just an option to consider. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Dominic could tell the idea had taken root. It made practical sense, certainly, but represented so much more than logistics. It was a step toward the family he had never known he wanted until a week ago, a chance to be the father, and perhaps eventually the partner, he now desperately wanted to be. 2 days before Vivian was scheduled to return, Dominic received an unexpected call from her in the middle of the afternoon. Is everything all right? He asked immediately, concerned by the unusual timing. Everything's fine, Vivian assured him, though her voice held an excitement he hadn't heard before. Better than fine, actually. I've just had the most extraordinary meeting with Julian Reynolds. The name was familiar, one of Chicago's most prominent developers, known for innovative urban renewal projects. He's been following the Lakefront Commons work, Vivian continued, words tumbling out in her enthusiasm. He wants to commission my firm for a major project in Washington. A complete neighborhood revitalization in Anacostia. Affordable housing, community spaces, sustainable design principles throughout. It's exactly the kind of project I've dreamed of doing. Vivian, that's wonderful, Dominic said sincerely, genuinely happy for her success. Congratulations. You deserve this recognition. There's more, she said, her voice softening slightly. I told him about our situation, the children, our new co-parenting arrangement. He suggested a potential collaboration between my firm and Thorn Architectural Group. Your technical expertise and global reputation combined with my community-focused approach. He thinks we could create something truly revolutionary together. The proposal took Dominic by surprise. Working with Vivian again, professionally as well as personally, combining their complementary strengths as they once had, the idea held immediate appeal. What do you think? He asked carefully, not wanting to pressure her either way. I think it could be amazing, Vivian admitted. Professionally speaking, we always did our best work together. Your precision and my intuition, your technical mastery and my human-centered approach. We balanced each other. We did, Dominic agreed, memories of their creative synergy flooding back. And we could again, if that's something you want. I'm open to exploring it, Vivian said, along with other possibilities. The implication in her voice sent a wave of hope through him. When do you return? Tomorrow, actually, she replied. The final structural reinforcements were completed this morning, ahead of schedule. I'm taking the evening flight back to D.C. The children will be thrilled, Dominic said. As am I. I've been thinking about your suggestion, Vivian continued, about the guest house. It makes sense, Dominic. For the children, for our co-parenting arrangement, for this potential professional collaboration. If the offer still stands, I'd like to try it. Joy surged through him, tempered by cautious optimism. The offer absolutely stands. The guest house is yours for as long as you want it. Thank you, Vivian said softly, for everything, Dominic. For being the father I always hoped you could be. For giving us a chance to create something new from what we once had. Thank you for bringing me back to life, Dominic replied, the words coming from the deepest part of him. Through our children. Through this second chance I never expected and certainly don't deserve. Perhaps we both deserve more than we've allowed ourselves to believe, Vivian suggested. Perhaps it's time we found out. As Dominic hung up the phone, he was filled with a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. The future stretching before him. A future with his children, with Vivian, with purpose beyond mere success. Seemed bright with promise and potential. 6 months later, the guest house stood empty. Its purpose served during a transitional period that had evolved into something neither Dominic nor Vivian had dared to imagine when 3 small children first called him Daddy. The main house had transformed as well, its once austere design softened by children's artwork on the walls, toys in previously immaculate rooms, and family photographs chronicling their journey from separate lives to a united whole. In the garden, under an arbor draped with spring flowers, Dominic watched as Vivian approached, led by 3 excited children in their finest clothes, each carrying a small basket of rose petals that they scattered with more enthusiasm than precision. "Daddy, did we do it right?" Eliza whispered loudly as they reached him, her copper curls adorned with tiny flowers that matched her mother's bouquet. "Perfectly," Dominic assured her, his eyes never leaving Vivian's radiant face. As his mother took charge of the children, settling them in the front row beside Eleanor and the small gathering of friends who had come to witness this new beginning, Dominic extended his hand to Vivian. "Ready?" he asked softly. "More than ready," she replied, her fingers intertwining with his. "It's been a long journey to this moment. Worth every step," Dominic said, thinking of the path that had brought them here. From passionate young lovers to estranged exes to co-parents and finally, today, to partners in every sense of the word. The ceremony was simple and intimate, focused on the family they had created rather than traditional wedding formalities. The children participated throughout, adding their own promises to the vows Dominic and Vivian exchanged. "I promise to be the best daddy ever," Dominic said solemnly to the triplets after completing his vows to Vivian. "To love you and your mother every day, to listen when you speak, to support your dreams, and to always be there when you need me. And we promise to love you back," Madeline responded, clearly having rehearsed her lines carefully, "and to not spill juice on your important papers." Laughter rippled through the small gathering, but Dominic felt the sincerity behind the childish promise. These 3 extraordinary children had taught him what truly mattered in life, had opened his heart to possibilities he had never imagined, had given him the courage to reach for the love he had once abandoned out of fear. As he kissed his bride to seal their vows, Dominic Thorne, billionaire architect, perfectionist, and now devoted husband and father, felt a completeness he had spent a lifetime searching for without even knowing it. "I love you," he whispered against Vivian's lips. "All 4 of you, more than I ever thought possible." "We love you too," she whispered back. "Thank you for coming home to us." And in that moment, surrounded by the family he had never expected to have, Dominic understood that sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive in packages we never anticipated, at times we never planned, through journeys we never would have chosen. Sometimes, the words, "I don't love you anymore," are just the beginning of a story that ends with, "I will love you always." Sometimes, 3 small children calling you daddy can lead to the greatest love story of all.